So, to kick the afternoon off, the next presentation is from Theodorou, who's going to explain the power of place. Location-based advertising has moved on, and Theo is going to give us 5 ways that show how location is revolutionising marketing strategy and provides the most truthful version of who we are on social media. Theodorou is the General Manager of GroundTruth for EMEA. He launched GroundTruth in 2014 and has been overseeing the rapid growth and revenue growth of GroundTruth across Europe and building its reputation as the global leader in driving in-store visits and sales by leveraging location as the primary source of intent. So please welcome Theo.
Thank you. So just by way of introduction, yes, I'm Theo. We're a global location technology platform. We actually have relationships with thousands of apps where we get opted-in location data. We actually own our own weather app as well, called the Weather Bug. And as just described, we're going to be talking about how we work with that data, the power of place, and actually how we can turn that into real world, not just behaviors, but insights and actions. And, you know, first of all, I'm going to state the bleeding obvious. We are all absolutely in love with our mobile phones. Sometimes love-hate. You know, it's not always good to be attached to these things, but the reality is we are spending probably way too much time on these devices. The advertising world today, I don't think I've ever seen or been in a period of flux that we're seeing right now in this space. And, you know, it is the very definition of VUCA kind of the scenario right now. And a lot of that is down to just the natural kind of speed of change. A lot of it's also down to mobile disrupting the traditional channels. If you look at the time spent on mobile today, 29% of us are kind of spending time on mobile versus other channels. But actually, if you look at the younger generation that are obviously learning mobile as their first device, their only device, their most personal device, that actually increases to 60%. So we think we're spending an awful lot of time versus share against these other channels. We've got this other younger generation that are coming through. And it is persistent, right? It's with us all the time. We're spending 5 hours a day on our mobile phones. And that's actually, that's a normal person. Everyone in this room, I guaranteed, is spending more than 5 hours a day on their mobile phone. If you really want to find out how much time you're spending on your phone a day, if you've not done this already, there's an app called Antisocial. There's actually a few of these apps that you can download, and it tracks exactly what your usage is on your phone, what you're spending on Facebook, Twitter. Only do it if you don't want to be surprised. That's what I'm saying. Has anyone actually done that before? I normally get 1 or 2 hands. It's scary. I'm getting up to 8 hours. And as a result, I've had to curb my addiction, because it is an addiction. It's also interfering with how we're interacting with other channels as well. Actually, if you look at the amount of time we spend watching TV, actually 70% of the time we're doing it with our mobile phone. 70% of the time we're sitting in front of our TV, we have another screen in front of us. Dual screening. It's like it's not enough screens in front of us, right? And again, millennials, 92% of them are sat there in front of the TV with their mobile phones. So it's no surprise ad spend is following. If you actually look at the predictions and the past, mobile advertising spend, certainly it's the UK stat, but you can apply it to the US, you can apply it to other markets as well. It's increasing, and it's actually taking share from other channels. And location services have become the norm. So if you actually think about how you use your mobile phones beyond your email and work day, how you order a taxi, how you order food to be delivered, when you're checking the weather, when you're going for a run, when you're even using news services that are being localized to where you are, these are all using location services that you've opted into. And that's grown 90%. And consumer comfort around this has increased as well. People do understand the value exchange with regards to location for all the benefits that we just described earlier on, to give you accurate weather, to give you interesting stats, etc. And as a result, marketing comfort has gone up in location as well. So we've seen increases in spend year over year over year. So by 2018, they're predicting it's going to be $22.1 billion spent in location advertising and services and insights. Which then leads it to the real world. 75% of consumers visit a store location after researching information on a mobile device. That's really interesting, right? Because if you think about mobile and you think about the device in your pocket, that is on you all the time. We are using it for things like this. So if you can capture someone in that moment when they're doing that research, then actually give them a relevant message that then can capture them into a store, that's powerful. And location is intent. 80% of retail purchases are made in the spur of the moment. And contrary to a lot of press out there about the death of the high street, 90% of retail transactions are still taking place in store. It's still happening out there in the real world. Yes, there is commerce. Yes, there is e-commerce. But people still do like to go out and shop in the real world. And we've seen this kind of evolution of intent as we've moved through this high-paced kind of evolution of the internet, if you like. If you think about search has always been about obviously looking for something in particular, and for an advertiser, certainly, the outcome has been online sales, whether it be an m-commerce sale, an e-commerce sale. And then you think about social, which is really around sharing and connecting. A lot of advertisers are still judging that by online sales. Where location fits in is that its expression of intent is an in-store visit. The outcome is someone buying something in a physical store. It's just been really difficult to capture that and understand that. That's been where the breakage has been in the past, because it's easy to do on Google, it's easier to do on some of these other channels, but trying to do that in the real world is really difficult. And this is a really good example of evolution of intent. There are 105 million users per month visiting McDonald's in the US, but only 5 million search for it online. So that's the discrepancy. And if you can actually make sense of that and actually build that into not just execution, but actually pre, post, and other communication planning, that's pretty interesting. And here's the thing. We're all really familiar with building audiences, building profiles, building insights based on what people like, share, and search for. You know, that's what a lot of the industry's been built up on. But here's the reality. What I like, share, and search for doesn't necessarily tell whoever the real me. And this is a good example where I might be, obviously this isn't me, but I might be looking for Burberry, I might be looking for Le Mer, but the reality is that my shopping habits might be very different. I might actually be going to the bargain bucket version of those brands, or alternatively the discount stores. It's like me looking for a Rolls Royce on the internet, liking a Rolls Royce on social network. But if I'm visiting mini dealerships, that should tell you something slightly different about what my ambitions are versus what I can afford. And really, that's the power of place, thinking about it that way. And this is what it's all about. What people do versus what they say they do is very, very different. It isn't the most honest version of who you are, because you have emotion, you have your PR machine, which is what I call Facebook for me. I don't ever put pictures of me when I'm really sad and not having a great time. I only ever put pictures when I'm on the roof of this hotel overlooking Rome with all you lovely people going, how amazing my life is, right? But the reality is I still wake up to emails where something's happened and I've got to deal with it, but I'm never going to put that on Facebook. It's not the real world. And we did some analysis, actually. We did a study last year where we surveyed 60,000 people, and it was around health consciousness, it was around dining preferences, and we actually lined that up against to visitation data of those people. So they allowed us to track them and work out what they were doing in the real world. And we really wanted to see that correlation between what someone says they do versus what they actually do. And if it lined up, because if it lined up, then, okay, fair enough, there is something in that. So what we found is definitions are subjective. People that have called themselves healthy consumers, self-identified themselves as people that go to the gym, that go to the juice bars and generally look after themselves, they actually indexed higher to going to off-licenses, pubs, and food and beverage and dessert places. So, what they say and what they do is very different. And never is a really strong word. 52% of people we asked, do you eat out? They said, no, we never eat out. And they actually went to McDonald's that month. So that's either they don't define that as eating out, or they forget. And actually, trying to remember where you've been is pretty tough as well. Recall fails. So 32% of people who said they went to McDonald's in the past, they didn't go. They actually thought they went to a McDonald's, and when they thought about it, when we looked at the data, they never went in there. I don't know where they went, but they didn't go there. So how do you get back to reality? That's the question. And here's the thing. Location is the most honest version of who you are. Where you've been and where you go, or where you are, that actually tells an awful lot about what an audience makeup is. And then you can start using that data, and you can start understanding that data. So I want to talk very briefly about 5 ways location can give you some insight, some breakthrough into how you capture that real-world intent and interest. So I think the one that we're a business that covers kind of execution. We serve advertising, but we also provide insights for a lot of companies as well. And some of the pre-planning insights that I think our clients and our customers find really interesting is when we start trying to understand trends. So if they're a particular brick and mortar store, whether they're kind of a quick service restaurant or a hotel or a supermarket, what's really interesting to them is trying to understand not when their popular days are, because they know when people are coming into their store, but actually how do they compare to the industry average? And actually then breaking that down to time of day. Why is this particular fast food restaurant doing really well at dinner, but are being beaten at breakfast in another area? That's really insightful for certain brands. And that data is hard to get. So we're able to give that data. And then brand overlap. So what's really interesting, we have hotel brands that are kind of looking at, well, look, I know I'm really busy Monday to Friday, but the weekend drops off. Well, what if you're able to say, well, your competitors are actually picking up at the weekends? That obviously means that they're doing something different to capture maybe a different audience, the weekend audience versus the business traveler. Or what if you're able to actually understand that users, or consumers, I should say, are coming from certain airport hubs and areas to my hotel versus others? That would probably be a good idea to start using that for maybe out-of-home planning. Right? It can kind of feed into different areas. And then it's really understanding where else my customers go in terms of my competitor set. Every brand that we work with has a very defined competitor set. These are my competitors. And it's interesting sometimes because what we're able to do is help them understand where else their customers go, and there's sometimes some conflicting kind of brands there. They go, well, that's not my competitor set. Well, actually, sometimes it is. If you're a fast food restaurant, actually Starbucks is a competitor. They get that now, but that's a kind of crude example. But it's things like this. And you can start breaking this out into fast food variety seekers. These people are brands that they just love brands that are fast food lovers. They love multiple brands no matter what the cuisine. So actually, if you can capture that data, then your messaging to that set of people is very, very different to people that are just kind of casual sit-down diners that eat out less but are more brand loyal. They'll keep visiting the same 3 or 4 branches. And then that can play out into post-campaign insights. So, what you're seeing here is month-over-month data where you're able to see people that have gone just to your brand, only your brand, versus people that are less loyal to your brand, or people you've actually lost, people that have actually migrated away from your brand, versus a post-campaign kind of analysis. And then it's about feeding that data back into not just our platform, but multiple platforms that you might be working with. And then it's audience discovery as well. Neighborhoods is a really interesting product for us. We launched this about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And Neighborhoods is really about understanding where users are coming from. So if I'm a restaurant, if I'm a supermarket, wouldn't it be great if I could understand where the regions, commuter hubs, and other store areas my customers are actually coming from and to? And again, that's been really hard to track and look at in the past, but what we're able to do now is pull that data out, and it helps brands uncover not only where their customers are coming from, but new audience segments that, again, feed into not just their mobile location planning, but actually their comms planning up here. And actually, in some cases, it actually plays into where else should I open a store? Because I know this is where my audience is, and I did not know that before. So it has, that data obviously has many shapes to it, but it's all about where that source of truth comes from and what you do with it. In our case, we've had brands that in the past wanted to target high-income business people, and the strategy around that was, let's just target the city. We'll target Canary Wharf, we'll target all the banks. That's where they are. That's quite limiting. Actually, a little bit of waste in there as well, because the reality is that not everybody in that is going to be your target audience. But they know things about their customers. They know that they love travel, they love tech, they love art and culture. So rather than just doing the old tactic of targeting these financial districts, we look at that real-world interest. So let's target those travel hubs. Let's target those exhibitions. Let's target those areas that we know our customers are going to be in the real world, but also those areas that they're coming from and to those areas as well. And then suddenly you've really increased your audience, and you've really increased the ability to talk to your consumer, not just once in one area when they're in work mode, but actually in areas where they'll be in a slightly different mindset as well. And it works. The results that you drive more efficient ways of finding a targeted audience, and more cost-effective ways of exposing a user to your messaging. Oh, went a bit quick there. And there's multiple ways you can do that. So it's through video or dynamic distance, through rich gallery experiences via your mobile phone. Again, we've seen that kind of evolution of creative and relevancy that now allows us to, in real time, direct someone to a particular offer, deliver a social connection in an app experience, or alternatively, quick gaming experiences as well in an app. And this is another example from Timberland where targeting based on new and kind of real-world behaviors using dynamic distance. So that's basically an ad that says, I know there's a Timberland literally just down the road from you. Click here if you want to know how to get there. We were able to actually drive real-world store visits to Timberland, and we've actually had some data that shows that we, in a recent campaign, drove 24% uplift in awareness for that campaign and actually nearly 20,000 visits to a store. And we can use it to predict behavior, which is really hard because we're really hard to predict. Humans can be a bit weird and do strange things. So trying to build that in a predictive model, actually, again, with location, you can see behavior that keeps repeating, that keeps being predicted, and you're able to actually optimize against that in the real world. So again, identifying your audience and then analyzing the data in the real world actually means you can capture segments that you know will be there in the future. And then we're moving on to redefining digital measurement, because the reality is, especially as we moving further into, I would say, pressurized situations for marketeers where they need to prove that every pound and every penny is delivering results. One of the challenges in location has been, okay, well, I've done that, but then what does that mean to my bottom line? And for us, it's about trying to drive real-world outcomes. Just clicks, secondary actions via an ad is not enough anymore. It is about trying to understand store visits and sales. So as a result of that, we launched a new product earlier this year, which was around cost per store visit. You know, if you are being judged on store visits, that's what we'll charge someone on. And actually, we're taking it one step further. In the US, we're actually able to close the loop and actually not only drive and track store visits, but actually look at ROI. So what did that store visit generate in terms of sales? So actually, you get to a number where you can start putting a definitive ROI onto a particular campaigns. And this was our first one that we did with Honda, and it was all about shifting their money into pay only for in-store visits. So it's pretty revolutionary. It's still quite nascent. A lot of our customers are still using insights and kind of slightly different buying models, but we are seeing that kind of growth and that ask from our customers. And I think in the UK, we're getting pretty close to actually also proving that ROI loop as well. So being able to track not only just in-store visits, but then actually what they did at the till point. So these are the key takeaways. Location is the highest indicator of intent. Location allows marketers to get back to reality, real outcomes in the real world. But it's about redefining how we think about marketing and not looking at it in silo. You need to take that insight and you need to put it into a wider strategy. It's about how you engage audiences. It's understanding where your audiences are coming from in the real world, so that you can start building new audiences that you can talk to using this technology. And it's about how we predict behaviors as well, because that data over time, you will see the same things coming through. And then how does that play into your kind of overall comms planning? And then it's about redefining how we measure impact. It is about store visits. It is about driving ROI at the till point, and then how does that knit together with everything else? So a lot of this stuff we're still working through, but it's pretty exciting from our point of view, because ultimately when we're sitting down with our customers, 9 times out of 10, it's don't tell me what I know, it's tell me what I don't know. And actually, if you believe location is the most honest version of someone, and if you believe you can do this at scale, and you can start working out where regions, areas, and where people are coming through, that's what you're telling them. It's what they don't know. And that's what's becoming really, really powerful and resonating in today's world where there is too much data almost to work with. That's it from me. Is there any questions? Do we have time for questions?
Yep, we have. We have time for questions. Fascinating stuff. So we'll bring a microphone to you. If you could just say where you work, that would be useful for the question. Thank you.
Hi, Dominic Chambers from Jackie Landrovers. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Could you just talk a bit about GDPR and
I knew it was coming.
Because this all sounds actually fantastic, but how are you getting permissions to target people on their location?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're using consent we won't run anything without consent. How we're actually doing it is we don't get the consent from the app. The app has to get consent, and then it's about us tracking that consent through the ecosystem. So we're going to be using the IAB consent framework, which audits and tracks that consent, and anything with a no you don't use. Where we're fortunate is that we have lots of direct relationships with apps. A lot of the apps that we work with, location is number one required for the app to work. There is a clear value exchange, and people understand that value exchange. Here's what's really interesting. I actually see a really big positive with this in the sense that location is, if you think about when you download an app, you're going to have to opt in via the app. There's also device level opt-in, opt-out, and then obviously you can go into your settings at any moment to stop location tracking, and you get a reminder on iOS if something's tracking your location in the background. So actually, because we're mostly in-app, we're all in-app, it's just about making sure that there's enough consented in apps to get this data from. That's our challenge. It's not whether it's GDPR compliant. So we are GDPR ready. We are using consent. And ultimately, and for example, we own the Weather Bug, which is a weather app. We ask for an explicit opt-in to use your location. So it's all about consent. And as long as we have that, then consumer knows what we're doing, advertisers know how we're getting consent and how it's being tracked. And if you're ever audited, you're in a good place.
Theo, could you build on that from people who in a similar space where you get a lot of their data from the bid stream?
I'm not going to comment on other people because I can only talk about my business, and it's a really touchy area for a lot of people. So I think ask those guys.
Sorry.
Theo, hi, Damon from Clear Channel. I just wondered about how accurate location is today, how real-time that location data is today, and how that is increasing over time. Is that an improving picture that location is getting much tighter? And then a sort of side question of just around the retail visits, whether you've managed to sort of isolate any kind of mall model at this time.
Yeah, good questions. So our whole business, when it launched 5 years ago, and you very kindly said I founded GroundTruth. I'm not the founder. I launched it here in Europe. It's actually a big US business. We're in 21 markets, and we've got about 400 employees, and that has come from the very first USP when our business launched, which was verifying location and making sure that it's accurate, because the reality is that the majority of the location signals that get sent from apps are inaccurate for certain use cases. So if you want to drive, or if you want to track a visit, or if you want to build an audience from where a group of stores that they've been in, you can only really use GPS and some other kind of signals from there, which knocks out 80% of the location signals that are there. So it's about having a platform that understands that cleans that data and only uses the right data, which is what we've done from the beginning. What was the other question that was around points of?
So it's around how real time that is, how accurate to the point of meters is that location, and then I was just interested about.
So extremely accurate. You're accurate to the GPS range that you're in, so nothing's 100%. So it could be 5 to 20 meters, depends on if you ever used Uber, you see that blue ball that gets smaller and smaller and smaller, that's it triangulating on your location. If you're in the app, it's actually very similar to that user experience, so it's real time. But obviously what we're also doing is building audiences, so although we're using real-time data, we're also using the data to build audiences for the future as well. Cool.
Fantastic stuff, very interesting. I liked your key takeaways,
Thank
especially
you.
McDonald's. Who are the people who have think they visited McDonald's but they haven't?
Well, we signed a anonymity with those guys, so we can't possibly throw them under the bus and tell everyone who they are.
I think
Jumped on the way home.
definitely went there. I think
We've all been there.
Yeah, I think we're talking about this is the power of marketing and the power of brands. Thank you
Exactly.
very much, Theo.
Pleasure.
Thank you.